There's a common assumption in Quebec politics that the big debate is about identity, about language, about the national question. But if you actually look at the data right now, that's not what's driving the political mood in Quebec. Not even close. Because Quebecers today are not asking who they are. They're asking something much more simpler. How am I going to pay? Welcome to This Thing, Quebec Politics with an Accent, a podcast where we try to make sense of Quebec politics for a Canadian audience. And right now, the data is pointing to something very clear. The political agenda in Quebec is being driven by economic pressure. Not identity, not sovereignty. Economic pressure. Today, we're looking at what the data actually says about the political mood in Quebec. Not the horse race, but the issues that actually shape political strategy. Because those issues tells us something important. They tell us what voters are worried about. And right now, those signals are very clear. In February 2026, a SOM survey published for the journal Le Soleil asked Quebecers what are their top priorities. About 70% included the cost of living in their top 3 priorities. Healthcare and housing came just after. Now go back a few months. In September 2025, Angus Reid asked Quebecers what are the most important issues facing the province right now. 59% said healthcare. 53% said the cost of living. 2 different polling firms, different moments in time, and yet the same message. Economic pressure dominates. Not ideology, not symbolism, bread and butter issues. Literally. There's another detail in that SOM poll that matters. Issues like sovereignty and secularism do appear, but they sit much, much lower on the list than economic concerns. Cost of living, healthcare, housing clearly dominates the top of the agenda. Questions about national identity are present, but they are secondary. And that creates an interesting tension in Quebec politics. Because the party currently leading in the polls, the Parti Québécois, is built around a new constitutional project. And constitutional projects requires attention. They require debate. They require voters to think long-term political change. But right now, most of the political attention in Quebec is focused somewhere else. On affordability, on healthcare, on housing, which creates a strategic challenge. How do you advance the creation of a new country with all the uncertainty that comes with it, while most of the voters are concerned on short-term economic pressure? There are usually 2 ways to do that. Either connect the new constitutional project to everyday life, and or convince voters that the current system is at the source of their problems. That's the strategic puzzle. A real puzzle for the Parti Québécois. Because right now, many Quebecers, actually most Quebecers, feel that the current constitutional project, aka Canada, is actually not part of the problem. Quebecers actually feel that Canada is protecting them rather than failing them. And when voters feel protected by the system, the appetite to change the system is much, much harder to create. This isn't just a list of priorities. It's also a psychological snapshot. Economic pressure can push societies into different directions. Sometimes it fuels big political movements. But in stable democracy like ours, it often does something simpler. It shifts attentions to everyday life. Bills, services, public services, the cost of living. When voters feel that kind of pressure, they usually look for practical relief, not big institutional changes. And that distinction matters for how parties will position themselves. So what does this mean strategically for any party? First, affordability has to be structural, not symbolic. Not just rebates, not just one-time checks. Voters under pressure want a clear explanation. Why is life more expensive? What can Quebec actually control? What can it control? And what is the long-term plan to make it better? Second, healthcare equals competence. When emergency rooms feel broken, the state itself starts to feel broken. And when the state feels broken, trust declines. You don't build trust under economic pressure by raising the volume of the political debate. You rebuild trust by projecting competence and compassion. Third, tone matters. In a pressure environment, calm beats outrage. Stability beats drama. Clarity beats noise. That doesn't mean being bland. It means being grounded in reality. If political parties focus on symbolic debates while voters are worried about everyday costs, they risk talking past the electorate. People notice when politics doesn't match their own reality. And when that happens, two things usually follow. Voters either tuned out or they look for someone else who actually understands the pressure they're going through. So here's the bottom line. The data isn't ambiguous. Cost of living, healthcare, housing. That's the pressure zone. The next political advantage in Quebec won't go to whoever defines identity the most loudly. It will go to whoever convinces Quebecers that life can become more manageable. Not perfect, more manageable. Because right now, Quebecers are not asking who they are. They're asking how are they going to pay. And in a pressure environment, voters are not looking for the most ambitious vision. They're looking for the most credible answer. Because when everyday life feels unstable, credibility beats ideology every single time.